Welcome back to the Caucus Corner, the podcast where policy meets people. I am your host, Assemblywoman Mikhail Salaj, chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Every episode, we shine a light on the issues shaping our communities and give a voice to leaders working to make a difference. Today, we're diving into a conversation that's long overdue: the unfair burden placed on New York's graduate student workers. These are folks who teach, grade, mentor, and conduct research across our SUNY campuses, often doing more than 60% of the instruction, and yet they are caught in a pay-to-work system. Despite being essential to the operation of our higher ed system, they're earning around $20,000 a year and paying up to 20% of that back in mandatory fees to their employers. It's unjust, and it's time to change that. The graduate worker fee bill aims to do that, and we're fighting in Albany to make it law. We've already seen progress with 2 phases of funding secured, but without legislative backing, the progress remains fragile. So today we are joined by a powerhouse of panels who are at the forefront of this movement. So let's kick it off with some introductions. So I'm first going to kick it off to Assemblywoman Gabriela Romero from Albany. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Chairwoman. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Gabriela Romero. I'm an Assembly member representing the 109th Assembly District. That includes the city of Albany, the town of Guilderland, and the town of New Scotland. I was a public defender before I was elected to the Assembly. This is my first term, and I was also on the Albany City Council. I completed a little bit of my first term there before I was in the New York State Assembly, and I'm in my first few months here, really getting through my first budget, having a really great time, and I'm the first Latina to represent the 109th Assembly District, and the first Latina to be elected, first female Latina to be elected outside of New York City. So it's really a great honor, really honored to be here and honored to be a part of the caucus as well, with my chairwoman. And thank you for having me on the podcast.
And it's always exciting to have your voice. We appreciate it. Next, I would like to introduce a representative from the CWA Union, Victoria.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Victoria Erdogu. I am representing CWA. So currently I'm serving as CWA Local 1104, GCU Binghamton Chapter President. Pretty long description. So I'm currently a PhD student myself in Binghamton University, studying political science. So CWA GCU represents all teaching and graduate assistants across SUNY system. So thank you for having me. I'm gladly will answer all of the questions you have.
And we appreciate you both being on the podcast. So, let's kick off the conversation. When we talk about the graduate workers, Victoria, can you just give us a quick landscape of who these individuals are and why it's so important that we fight for them?
Sure. So CWA District 1 actually represents approximately 5,000 graduate student employees across SUNY system. So graduate student workers, they serve as teaching assistant, graduate assistant, and research assistant, and we do a lot of different stuff, from grading papers to doing like research on campus in the labs. So some of us, like 40% of classes are taught by teaching assistant, graduate assistants. Some of them are as a teaching assistant and some of them as, main instructors of record.
So, Assemblywoman Romero, how is this going to benefit New York students as they transition from undergrad into graduate positions?
Yeah, this bill is such a critical step forward in supporting our graduate students who play, as we all know, a really essential role in our higher education network and our higher education system here in New York State. And what we're really trying to do with this bill is ending an unfair financial burden that's been placed on our graduate student workers in the SUNY and the CUNY institutions. And right now, these students, whether they're teaching undergrads or conducting research or, assisting in labs, they're required to pay hundreds or, frankly, sometimes thousands of dollars each year in these mandatory university fees, despite the fact that they're already earning, modest stipends that on average are around, 10,000, 20,000 per year. And when you consider that these fees can make up, 10 or 20% of their actual income, it becomes clear that we're just like asking people to pay to work. And so this bill, this legislation ensures that SUNY and CUNY can no longer charge these mandatory fees to our graduate students that are serving in these key academic roles that are required in SUNY and CUNY to function. And I think the exception, though, is the graduate student activity fee, which still is, I think, a portion that's still staying within this legislation. But the point of the bill is about, fairness, respect for our labor force, for these graduate students that are pursuing this advanced degree, and we're trying to make sure that they're not living in poverty. And in general, this legislation just strengthens our public universities by making sure that we value them in a greater and more respectful way.
And so I know, Victoria, I really want to hone in because, unions are the backbone of New York State. And the reasons why we have so many protections for all industries and many workers is because of the unions that exist. And so I know that CWA represents thousands of graduate workers across the SUNY system. But can you share how your union has been involved in the fight and what collective bargaining has looked like so far, and what wins do you see and what challenges remain?
Yes, sure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it a little bit more. So, as Assemblywoman Romero mentioned, that graduate student workers, our duties range from teaching courses, grading exams, papers, and conducting laboratory research. What have been done so far in 2022, graduate student workers won a commitment to fund phasing our mandatory broad-based fees for SUNY, at least, graduate workers. And it was successful. And I think in the fiscal year 2024, we received $3 million, and in fiscal year 2025, we receive around $6 million. And this is a great commitment, but so far it's only a handshake commitment. So we're with the current crisis and cuts, we're just hoping that this commitment could be codified in a bill, so it will actually make lives of graduate student workers easier. And I think it's important to point out that we're not just students, we're not just graduate students, but we are also workers on campus. So we as grad student workers perform virtual function of SUNY in SUNY campuses. I'm sure in CUNY the grad student workers doing the same. Many classes are taught by us. In fact, like in Stony Brook, for example, we independently teach around 60% of courses as graduate students. So basically right now we're asked just to pay to our employer to actually work, which sounds a little bit ridiculous. So far since 2022, we have been working on that, and we're very happy to have this commitment, and we're still right now actually as a GCU in the bargaining with state of New York for a new contract, as our contract was off in 2023. So this bargaining has been taking some time, unfortunately.
And so when we talk about these issues, it's not just a workers' rights issue, it's also a racial justice issue. So I don't know if either one can speak to the fact that these fees disproportionately impact students of color, low-income students, and first-generation college students, especially when we talk about the declining Black enrollment across the country. Like, what message does this system send to aspiring scholars from marginalized backgrounds?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on this, but Victoria, I want to make sure that you also add your voice to this. But I, as a really proud sponsor of the bill, I think that the reality is that the financial barriers disproportionately impact BIPOC students at every level of higher education, and graduate school is really just like no exception to that. And that's why I'm a really proud sponsor of this bill. And So for many students of color, this like combination of low stipends and high mandatory fees create this terrible and scary, insurmountable financial burden. And it means like taking on more debt and like working multiple jobs or just like leaving academia altogether. And so this bill just really directly addresses one of those barriers by eliminating this mandatory university fee for the graduate student workers. And by doing that, you're just putting actual money back in the pockets of students. And so when we're talking about equity, like this concept just like really matters because it's not about the access to graduate school. It's about the ability to stay in graduate school and then thrive while you're there altogether. And I think the studies will show that communities of color have like for a very, very long time been underrepresented in advanced degree programs and financial instability is a really big part of why. And this legislation can be one part of many and a step forward in like leveling that really big playing field. And it'll signal to our values as a caucus in how we value the contributions of graduate students in the BIPOC community, not just as students, but obviously as like educators, researchers, laborers, and future leaders. So I think this legislation is so important and it helps ensure that, the doors to opportunity stay open for everyone. Victoria, I'm not sure if you wanted to also touch on this too.
Yes, sure. Actually, I think it makes sense to actually start a little bit at the beginning. So, you've Assemblywoman Romero, you actually mentioned a little bit about numbers, but I think it's worth to explain a little bit more. So, when we say graduate student, we talk about master student and PhD students. So on average, master degree takes 2 years, and the PhD degree takes from 4 to 5 to sometimes 6 years. So people of color and international students, we all face economic disadvantage in this sense. So on average, PhD students, I actually paid around $20,000 per year in a stipend. And which means that this broad fees actually make of like around 15% of our annual income, because they range from, depending on the university, they range from 1,000 to 1,500 per year. And it's like financial instability is the major factor in grad student life. Unfortunately, our paycheck is below the living cost of living, which makes it difficult to just afford rent, buy groceries, just even attend conferences sometimes, or just to feel, financially stable, because we need to think about how to pay rent, afford, food on our table, but instead of just thinking about our research and actually moving the science forward, because at the end, after we finish our master degree or our PhD degree, so we're going to be a scientist, educators, and some of us hopefully will you know make life better for other folks. So when it comes to BIPOC students, I don't think CWA has specific statistics on that, but we do know that approximately 40% of graduate students are international students. And when I mean international students, I'm talking about students coming from Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa. So I think these students are actually even more disadvantaged because they don't have opportunity to apply to some federal funds. And historically, as you mentioned, Assemblywoman Romero, many BIPOC students have higher debt burdens, and it takes, as I mentioned, a lot of time to complete the degree. So, yeah, we have to max our credit cards, to take loans, and definitely this bill will support the diverse grad student workers.
So I think with that, I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to turn our attention to organizing on the ground because no one should have to pay to work. We want living wages here in New York State. We want to empower families to have upward mobility and economic success. And so, what action can grad students, our listeners, take to support this bill and push for more fair treatment in the workplaces? Are there specific campaigns, events, outreach strategies that are proving successful or we need to get involved in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the main things that we're doing right now, we're organizing on the ground because of these hardships. Sometimes people and these days, the current administration tactics. Sometimes people are afraid to be a part of the union, so we're working on the ground with grad students to make sure that they are all represented by CWA, by GCU. We have multiple campaigns going on right now. I think it's a dynamic environment in this sense. As I mentioned, we're still bargaining for the new contract. And our main ask right now is just from legislators to just make sure that we have this agreement codified and we have broad fees, eliminated ideally, but our main ask is the commitment to include the language for fiscal year budget for 2026 that would codify the commitment to phase out these fees for grad student workers at the rate of 25%, and in the upcoming year, fiscal year 2027, that would eliminate it completely. I think that's the main language of the bill. If Assemblymember Romero can maybe talk a little bit that more, that would be great. But I think this is the main ask that we're hoping to reach.
Great points, Victoria. And I know for Assembly Member, is there anything that can be done on our side to advocate for this through the caucus?
Yeah, I think that it's important to just emphasize to our colleagues and get this out on the ground. Not only, of course, it's a caucus issue for the reasons that I mentioned, but this is really like a labor issue. This is a student issue. This is a SUNY issue. This affects everyone across New York State. If you don't have children in the SUNY system, you have family members in the SUNY system. This is something that should be able to pass easily this year. I'm such a proud sponsor of this bill, a supporter of this bill, and I hope to get my colleagues all in support of this, and hopefully we can get something through this year.
Well, I have to thank both of you because we just heard today about an unjust system that punishes the very people who help educate our next generation. And I do think it's time for New York State to recognize that graduate workers are not just students, they are employees, and they deserve to be treated with fairness and respect. We've made progress, but the fight isn't over. And that's why I'm calling on New Yorkers to take action. So whether it's a call your senator, state senator, or your assembly member, share this podcast or follow the BPHA caucus to stay updated. It's time for us to get involved. And this is how we build a higher education system that works for everyone. So thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Caucus Corner. And until next time.